welcome to our program. Today we are visiting the exhibition Identity on the Line. This exhibition is one of the outcomes of a 4-year research project on immigration and identity. Let's check it out.
When we talked with our informants, we were surprised how ignorant some of the people they meet are about Greenland and Greenlanders and about other people. And just to approach this ignorance, the only thing I think that can make a difference is more information and dialogue, and just an introduction to what's the world all about, and especially I think for Danes, Greenland should be an object of interest, and sadly it isn't to the extent that we could have hoped. No. But hopefully it's getting better.
Okay.
Because it creates, I think, it creates opposition, also from both sides. The less you know about each other,
like rivalry.
Exactly.
Unnecessary.
And it is unnecessary, and it's sad actually. Yeah. So hopefully it will get better.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
So this was the Danish Greenlandic part of the program. Then we have here a different
Slovenia.
And this is Slovenia. Yeah, and I mentioned it before. It's about when the Yugoslavia were dissolved, and what happened to the people who had moved internally in Yugoslavia. And what happened in Slovenia with these people, and our colleagues in Slovenia has talked to a specific group of informants about their experiences, and they were actually they lost their legal rights and actually had their identities or their legal identities removed. And suddenly they didn't have a country anymore because they couldn't return to the original part of where they came from, and they felt that they were part of Slovenia. So that's really also a tough migration story that came out of things happening that they couldn't control and they didn't have any influence on.
So the main topic here is Yugoslavia, basically.
Yes, this is
the consequences for people in Slovenia
of the fall of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. And we have here. This is, of course, one of the most tough one, Lithuania, where they have talked to. People being hit by the Holocaust and being deported to concentration camps and surviving that, and how did that affect them, of course.
So who are the people who were interviewed in here? Was it a survivor, family, like relatives to survivors?
It was survivors, so very old people, of course, but it was survivors and also families of survivors that could tell or retell stories from their family members that had experienced this. And of course, again, what we talked about earlier, some of the experienced, of course, were still in these people that survived the concentration camps and knew that they, at what they have seen and what they've experienced, of course stayed in them the rest of their lives, and of course that their children, their grandchildren could feel that there was something they didn't understand, and something that they might not be able to talk about and couldn't talk about. So and again, and this has created their identity, and it was forced upon them. And it has been so difficult to talk about, of course.
So I can only imagine.
And we have here, of course, the more specific historical background, and all these stories can be found online also. And if you go for Identity on the Line, and you can study them more carefully. And this is also the Second World War. Norway, the stories they invited informants where German soldiers have had children with Norwegian women during the Second World War. Norway was a country with, I think, 4.5 million people, and 500,000, 500,000 German soldiers went to Norway during the Second World War. So there was a huge amount, and proportionally so many German soldiers, young men coming to Norway, and of course some of the Norwegian women fell in love and they had children.
So is this being told from which perspective?
This is being told from the families resulting from these affairs, this has been there's been so much shame and so much secrecy. Because the reaction after the Second World War, of course, was that anyone who had any kind of contact with German soldiers were a traitor and shouldn't have done that. So the children of these affairs, of course, were even worse. And so, but there's been some very, very strong and very courageous informants talking about their experience and how they live with this today, and for how long it was a secret. Yeah, because it wasn't their choosing, and many of the Norwegian women, young women, they just loved this young German soldier. And I think one of them, actually, one of the quotes is that I didn't meet a German soldier. I didn't meet the Wehrmacht. I just met a lovely, nice young man and fell in love, and that's how this woman saw it. But this wasn't how society saw it. Yeah.
It must be so hard for the kids.
And so they were told to keep it a secret, if they knew at all. And so you can imagine.
Yeah. This is one of the cases. There was a question there for the openness and silence. Yeah. That if it's was it something like if it's better for us to keep certain things from being said. Do you think this was one of those cases that it's like kind of a gray zone?
Yeah. Because here we have the shame also, and so it is. And I think many of, especially the first generation, to experience whatever it might be of these things, have actually tried to protect their children and their children's children. Yeah. But often. We have experienced it is better to talk about it in the family at least, and so people understand why you think like you do, why you react as you do. Some of the first generation experiencing war, it has affected their way of reacting to certain events and maybe being violent or aggressive or whatever, but nobody understood why. And so if you communicate, if you talk about what you have experienced, maybe things makes more sense then. Yeah. Let's see if we can find the rest of the countries. It must be down here. Yeah. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to Słupsk in Poland, and all the project partners are going to meet there. And this is the Polish case, and that Słupsk is were German before the war, and after the war they changed the boundaries, what you call it?
Yeah, the borders.
Yeah, exactly. The borders between Germany and Poland, and Słupsk became a Polish city. And a lot of German citizens were forced to move, and a lot of Poles were then introduced to the city. And so how did the ones being expelled feel like? And how does it feel to then take this the city and the territory as a Pole, actually moving into former German houses and in the German city? And this has also really affected how these people saw themselves and how they experienced life after the Second World War, and being removed from your home and being forced somewhere else. So also very, very strong stories here about identity, because if you felt that you were from the city and suddenly you had to go, and how did that affect them? Yeah. Now it's starting to rain. Maybe we should speed it up a little. I'm sorry, but
yeah, no problem. So there's Croatia.
There's Croatia, yeah, and the museum working in Croatia is the Ethnographical Museum of Istria. Istria is a peninsula, and it's on the border of. It's a very complicated history of different kinds of powers having the hold of this part of Croatia. But they have focused on, after the Second World War, a lot of Italians seeing themselves as Italians living in this area of Istria were seen as fascists and were not welcomed in Croatia anymore after the war, because they were seen as being actually the main drivers of the Second World War in that part of region. So they were expelled, and some chose to leave by themselves, and some chose to stay.
The last country, Sweden?
Our Swedish partners are working from the Sami Museum in Jokkmokk, in northern part of Sweden, and they have a very complicated also story where, after Sweden and Norway broke up, the two countries decided that they would secure their borders much more strongly. And that, of course, affected the nomad people of the Sami reindeer herders. And suddenly there wasn't enough space to drive the reindeers. And at the same time, the Swedish government decided to move some Sami reindeer herders from the north down to the south, where a different kind of Sami lived. And they didn't want the northern part of the Samis to come to their areas because they needed the space, and the northern Sami didn't want to leave their homeland. And they didn't care about the border between Norway and Sweden and Finland and Russia, because they were a nomadic people and they needed to drive their reindeer herds. But they were forced to move down to the further south and intermingle with this different kind of Sami people. And that created amongst the Sami people conflicts that they didn't want, but that was because of the Swedish government deciding this.
So again, another decision that was not really made.
Exactly. And this is many years ago, and the conflict still goes on. And we heard when we went to visit him that now you are beginning to see a few marriages between the northern Samis and the southern Samis living together now in the same area. But still you have this deeply rooted conflict, which none of the groups actually, no, it wasn't their fault. And it had driven a wedge down between these groups. And so how does that affect the Sami life, their identity, their possibilities to work with the reindeers? Because that is also being constantly challenged by other decisions of mining and stuff like that. So yeah, it's also very tragic and very, very complicated. So I'm sorry we couldn't see the pictures, but
no problem. No problem. Is there anything else you would like to add about the exhibition in general, about the project, about future projects?
Yeah, the exhibition now we'll take it down tomorrow here in Aarhus, but then it will move to Poland and to Lithuania, but it will live on online. And actually already it is online, so you can see the whole exhibition as it stands here if you search for Identity on the Line. And we are now developing school materials, and we have articles, and we have also the movies, and slowly we will upload everything, so all these materials will be accessible online. In the Danish project we have all the interviews as a PDF, so you can read them, all of them. And then our national exhibition will be traveling now to the Greenlandic House of Copenhagen, and it's just been in Aarhus, and then we'll go to Odense and Aalborg. And we hope that as many as possible will see it. And this will also be offered to schools if they want to, as a digital material. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, this was the best we could do. What we had. But thank you so much for showing us around.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Nice having you. Yeah.
So, Hen, what is your vision from this exhibition? What do you think that this exhibition has brought to Greenlandic people in Denmark?
I think the most important part of the exhibition is the personal story. That's sometimes lacking a bit. We have a tendency to tell two different stories when we talk about Greenland and Denmark. So we talk about this exotic country with the beautiful nature and the old narrative, let's call it that, the traditional narrative on the one side, and then on the other hand we have a narrative about everything that's difficult, abuse and alcohol and violence and all of that. So that's like the two main stories that we're usually hearing. This exhibition is telling the stories that are like lying in between the two narratives. So ordinary people's ordinary stories about belonging in two different countries, having very deep cultural roots in one area, maybe living in another. The whole issue around language, being able to speak Greenlandic or not, and how that defines your identity. So I feel like that's the most important story that this exhibition brings to the table. It's about identity and representing the in-between the two extremes.
And what do you think is the current relationship between Greenlandic people and Danish? Do you think, like in the last years, did it got better? Because this was not really a topic for a long time, and now it's starting to open up a little bit, right? Do you feel like was there some improvement? Did it get worse with more information? What do you think?
I think knowledge is the key. So the fact that Denmark is starting to show more interest in Greenland, and not only, you know, the narrative I was just presenting, but also there's been a lot of television shows and different stories, podcasts, exhibitions and so on. So I think the interest in a different view on Greenland is rising, and that helps a lot. When we do you know, statistics and stuff, it always shows that the more you know about a people or a country, the less likely you are to have a lot of stereotypes and prejudice about those people. So yeah, knowledge is key, and I think it's going in the right direction at the moment, slowly.
Someone was also mentioning that whenever someone was introducing themselves to a Danish person, they would need to kind of break down the stereotypes every single time. Can you relate to this? Do you think it is accurate from your experience in the Greenlandic house?
Yeah, we hear that a lot, especially from the students. A lot of young people from Greenland go to Denmark for educational purposes, and one of the things we hear from them is that you really have to explain a lot. You're doing a lot of explaining. No, we don't have ice bears walking around, and I don't live in an igloo, and we actually have Wi-Fi, and blah blah blah. So you're really starting at a minimum knowledge level, and then from the perspective of the Dane, and then you have to really educate them on what Greenland is and what your background is and the history. And one of the questions I get asked a lot when I'm teaching is stuff like, do they even have democracy in Greenland? And I mean, it's just the level of knowledge is very low, and that's hard. It also means that you don't get to be yourself. You get to represent Greenland instead of being a person that's living in a country doing an education. You have a lot of other stuff that you are forced to focus on as well.
Yeah. Do you think the case is similar to Greenlanders that moved here like when they were 15 or something, or someone who was actually born here? Do you think there's a difference in those cases from maybe more of a Danish perspective, or is it kind of similar, like the struggles and everything?
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar actually. Okay. I don't have an answer to why, but we hear it from people who have lived there their entire lives.
Yeah. And they still encounter this every day.
Definitely.
Do they also share how it makes them feel? Like, does it make them think maybe I should go somewhere else? Maybe I should go back to Greenland, or maybe I should try a new country?
Yeah.
Do people actually do it?
See, that's mostly the students as well, as I know of, who actually, say, nope, this is not for me. This is too much. I'm going back to Greenland. But yeah, that's also one of the narratives represented in the exhibition. The whole when you have a mixed identity and you live in Greenland, then you're too Danish, and then you come to Denmark, and then you're too Greenlandic. I mean, it's this whole split identity that's really difficult, and that's been having that being pointed out to you so much is just really tough. Yeah, that's what we hear a lot in the house. Yeah.
Do they express some wishes of how things could be better from their perspective, like kind of not solutions, but maybe the right words, maybe not the right word, but the best word right now is solutions. Do they come up with some things like, I wish this would happen, or if this would be improved, this would be better, or something like this? Do they have any perspective on?
I think I think it's a wrong way to do it. So this is my opinion. You don't get the solutions from the people who are struggling, in pain. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we're asking so much of them already. Okay. So when you are the person who your family has, Denmark and Greenland has a complicated history. Let me put it like that. And I don't want to talk about fault and shame, and but the history and the relationship between Denmark and Greenland does not, how to put this in a good way, it's not up to Greenland to provide the solutions. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
I do understand.
Yeah, it's very political, and it's very difficult. There's a lot of nuances in it, but yeah, that's my best solution is not to just leave the responsibility to make this better to Greenland, because Denmark is very responsible for these people.
Yeah. What I meant with the question was more like if they have any maybe personal needs or something, and a solution for it, not necessarily in a way that, of course, they will not be able to change anything, unfortunately. Things are not like that. But yeah, more of a personal opinion or something that they struggle with. But usually it's this lack of education issue, right? And that has been worked on.
Knowledge is often a thing. I get this question a lot, and usually my answer is to read Nevia Corneliusen's Blomsterdalen, because this book actually, it doesn't provide a solution. That would be too easy, but it actually covers a lot of these questions. So that would be my recommendation, to dive into literature, art, exhibitions, and just, see things from a different perspective. Yeah, from the Greenlandic perspective, we need to do that more as a people, as a Danish people, to try to understand what is behind and why these people are sometimes, having some difficulties in Denmark. Yeah.
Do you also hear like positive stories?
Oh, all the time, and I think that's also one of the most important roles for the Greenlandic House, is to tell the different stories. To tell, which I also believe that this exhibition does. Raising questions about identity and migration is not all about negative stuff, because it's the circumstances and the people who contributed to this exhibition are living normal lives. I mean, very, very normal lives, just different circumstances. And those stories are very important. And that's what we do in the house when we have art exhibitions and when we invite people to eat with us, or what we're doing. We're just trying to create connections between ordinary people with normal lives. Yeah.
So there is mostly Greenlandic people attending these events. Like, are there also Danes that are interested? Like, how does it? How is it going? The connection inside the house.
Yeah, it's funny because when you call something the Greenlandic House, then you will also think, oh, it's only for people from Greenland or people who has a very strong connection to Greenland. But we actually make sure that everything we do is open for everyone. So that's a hard group to work with, you know, everyone. But yeah, that's really important. That's also why when we do these cultural events, we always strive to have like a very high quality of the things we do. Yeah, so definitely creating a space for meetings. Yeah.
For connections.
Yeah, and that can be a meeting, you know, when you're sitting down with someone and having a conversation, like one-to-one, face-to-face, but it can also be a meeting between you and a piece of art, or you and some music, and, you know, just the experience, the true experience of something authentic that's right in front of you. That's the room we're trying to be in the house, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add about the exhibition, about maybe your personal experience with the issue, about the Greenlandic House?
I think, and this is this is my dream. It sounds very big, but it's very simple. It's just every time we do something, we do a festival or we do some kind of event, or we have a new idea, then try to think about Greenland as well. So it's a matter of representation. It's knowing that there's a lot going on in Greenland, and there's a lot of knowledge there. There's a lot of art, music. There's a lot of ideas. The whole conversation about climate change. I mean, if we don't involve Greenland and Greenlandic voices in those conversations, in those events, then we're just, you know, cheating ourselves. So that's what I hope that everyone will do when they start creating stuff, include Greenland. Yeah.
That was it for today. We hope you enjoyed the programs. See you soon.